Are we ready?
Yes.
Well, hello everybody. I'm Roos Ykema. I'm second year bachelor student of environmental sciences on the UU. And I'm going to talk about food today. So let me start with why I love food so much. So then at least you know my personal relation with food. I'm very sorry for Alinda, but I really like steak with a sauce of gorgonzola and shrimps. And
I did too.
that's very honest of you, thank you. And I like bacon with endive stamppot. And when I was in India in my gap year, there were a lot of things. I really loved the Indian food, but I also really missed some of the food that I had at home. So I made a small list to remember that the first thing that I would do when I was home was to eat a brownie and eat some Tony chocolonely. I think I'm not the only one. And bake a carrot cake and make some peppermint tiramisu, which was really important for me because I was there with Sinterklaas, so I was so sad that I missed all the pepper nuts. So that's my personal experience with having a lack of food, which is of course not really serious. I guess that no one ever really had serious concerns about being fed and having enough food to sustain yourself. Let me see. When I was a child, I remember that I once had an argument with a friend of mine. I think I was around 10, and we were discussing about our futures and our dreams and our plans. And his dream was just to find a normal job, live in the village where we grew up, and not really get mingled into complicated things abroad. And I was actually so angry with him. I had always wanted to be a development worker, and I just couldn't understand that somebody was not interested in the rest of the world. And I thought actually it was a crime not to become a development worker. So when I was 14, I got the opportunity to leave my little village and become an ambassador for World Vision and Sip Your Lip. Did anyone ever hear of Sip Your Lip?
Yeah.
Yeah? So it's, you don't eat anything for 24 hours and you raise funds with, like you ask all your friends and family to donate some money, and that's how you raise funds to do some projects. And when I was there, the project went to Uganda, so I also visited the project there. We went to the north of Uganda in Gulu, and that's the area that was quite severely affected by the Lord's Resistance Army. I think most of you have heard of it. It's the army of Joseph Kony, and got quite famous with the Invisible Children. Before that, when I went there, no one had ever heard of it. I don't know if that was because of my small little village, or if it was the same in Utrecht. But no one had ever heard of the Lord's Resistance Army. But the damage they did was just incredible. They killed all the men, raped all the women, took all the children that were under 12 years old and were old enough to become child soldiers. So when I went there, there had been peace for a couple of years. But if you just went in the refugee camps, any single individual would have such a terrible story to tell. And no one in the Netherlands knew anything about it. It was so strange. We walked around and there were people sitting there in front of their huts or their tents, and they were just sitting there with a look of despair in their face, and their children would all have those big bellies because of the lack of protein. And it was such incredible amount of misery. There were a couple of stories. One I want to share one of you. There was a boy called Joseph, and he was of my age. I think he's 20 now. And his father died because of the Lord's Resistance Army. His mother died because of AIDS. And then he found out that he was HIV positive as well. And because there was such a huge stigma, his uncle kicked him out, and he had to take care of himself and his younger sisters. By the time he was 15, and his sisters were 7 and 10 years old, and he had so much dreams and ambitions. He was a really smart boy. He wanted to be a priest. I'm not a religious person, but it was so beautiful to see somebody that had just, no one had ever taken care of him, and still his biggest dream was to become somebody that would take care of his community and to help others. And because of World Vision. Now he's in school, and I'm really thankful for that. But to see someone like that and to think about your own life here, the difference is just so incredible. And he just had to work every day to make sure that his sisters were fed, and he would skip his own meals to feed his own sisters. And maybe we would do the same if it were our sisters or brothers, but we never do the same if it's somebody on the other side of the world. What I've seen there was really, it just broke my heart. I had a really tough time afterwards, and it was so hard for me to give it a positive twist and to believe that I could change the world. But then for my work as an ambassador, I was able to speak to youth and to speak to thousands of children and inspire people. And I really believe that you can't do it alone, but if you have a word and you can spread it, you can inspire a lot of people, and you can, if you want to, you can inspire thousands of people, and you can actually make a change all together. Yeah, so I've been an ambassador for 2 years, and then I just finished my high school, and I took a gap year, and then I went to Syria. Or I didn't go to Syria, I went to the Syrian border in Jordan, and I worked with refugees. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but you probably have heard of the research where you have the baby monkey, and you have a mother that has milk, but she's made of iron and steel, and you have a soft mother that is just a toy, and she's soft and more like a mother. And the baby monkey is always attached to the mother that doesn't give him any food, but is at least soft and comfortable, and it gives him some sense of safety to be with her, even though there is no food. So what this proves is that actually a lack of food is something really bad and really sad, but what is actually the thing that humans need the most, and the thing they can't live without, is a sense of safety and a sense of love. When I went to those Syrian refugees, there was a small boy. We were visiting a family, and they lived in some sort of, well, it was not really a house. It was actually built for cows, but because all the houses were taken by all the refugees, they were just living in this small area, and like there were 4 walls and a roof, but that was just it. And there was no floor, there was no gas, there was no electricity. They were just in the middle of the desert, and there were a lot of flies, and they were just there all by themselves. And there was a family with 9 children, and the father and the mother was pregnant, and they were so, there was just no hope in their faces. And then there was this little boy, one of their sons, and when we came in, he came to us, he shook our hands, he gave us kisses, like that's what you do when you meet a family in Jordan. But when he sat down, there was no way to make a connection with him. He didn't smile, he didn't laugh, he wasn't angry, he was just nothing. It was as if he was already dead inside. And he was so afraid of everything. And I don't know how he's doing now. I have no clue. But I fear that it's not much better, because he was severely traumatized. They lost all their family, all their uncles and aunts, and then they were at home and their car got bombed. So they all walked outside of their homes, and then their home got bombed. So they were just in time, and they were actually lucky that the bomb fell on the car first, and they all went out, and then they got out of Syria, and they went to Jordan, and they were just sitting there in the middle of the desert, and there was no road, no food. We would bring them some food packages, but they were all so depressed and so traumatized. And then you have this small boy, and I was really trying to get in touch with him to make him do anything. I didn't care, as long as there would come some emotional reaction. And his father and mother, they saw me trying to connect with him, and they said, "Please, can you take him with you, because we can't take it anymore. We have too much already. We have to feed our other children." So Afterwards, I went to Armenia, and Armenia is the country where the first genocide took place in the First World War. And I want to cite James Barton, who wrote the story of the Near East Relief. And he is actually one of the first, I don't know if he was officially a psychologist, but he tried to be a psychologist and tried to develop ways to deal with traumatized children. It will be entirely incomprehensible to people living in civilized countries to imagine a group of hundreds of children upon whose face a smile never appears and who have no incentive to play. This was the most unnatural, appalling characteristic of the newly discovered children. Their diseased and filthy bodies and scant clothing were heartbreaking enough, but to see them huddled together in groups with the least sign of a smile or the least effort to entertain themselves was vastly more pathetic. The children did not weep or moan or beg for anything. They simply sat about for days, with a look of despair on their faces, with no interest in their companions, no curiosity, an entire absence of normal childhood. Now this is what happens to people if they lack food, and if they lack safety, and if everything that is meaningful to them is taken away from them. I think that in the Netherlands, we hardly realize how tough life can be. We hear news about Syria, we see it on the television, we see bombings, we see screaming people, and we hear them saying Allah Akbar, and we think, oh, that's such a weird language, and we're afraid of ISIS coming to us, but we hardly realize how life is for those people. And I think that if we would all stick together, if everyone would actually try to feel what it feels like, what these people go through, if you could actually imagine how you would feel if you lose all your family, if you have nothing to live off, if there is no food, no security, just literally nothing, what would it be like for you? And how easy can it be to relieve at least a little bit? If there is food, if there is a blanket, these are really basic things that a lot of people in this world don't have. So I'm trying to dedicate my life to making at least a small change, and I hope you're with me. Thank you.